So, how did we get in the situation that we currently face as it is in 2020 with all these different truths coming out about the Biden administration and how his CIA director visited Epstein Island like 3 times after he had already been accused for everything and the sex crimes? I want to ask, how did all these things go on the last 4 years and nothing had ever been really done about it other than just investigating and looking into things possibly, and nobody realizes it was a color revolution. It was all intentional, and they used the culture. That's always what they did. And it's nothing new. It goes all the way back to the Soviet Union. It goes all the way back to the Attila the Hun, for crying out loud. And what they did was they, on an ideological level, fragmented the culture by causing you to split in a personality or having a multitude of different personalities. They're using trauma-based mind control, and they're putting it in their news, their entertainment, everything, every soundbite, every headline, article. It all has trauma inserted in it, fear inserted in it, so that you live in not only a sense of self-doubt as to the status quo, the mess we're in this world, but also struggling with young people in the formulation of their identity, because if they can get to you at a young age, they can control you. And the answer really isn't all that complex, right? They get to the kids at a very young age and they try to mold them like little cult objects in order to go out and in some way or another work for an entity that is controlled by what is more or less the 13 bloodline families that rule the world. I've spoken many different times about who those families are, at least the front runners. But there's a lot of people in this world that now control it that had to run in these circles, that had to go through these channels in order to get where they are today. You know, very, very high up administrative positions, making all the biggest decisions that are very fragile to the maintenance of a modern day civilization. And it starts with the individual. So if they cannot control the individual, it creates a problem for them. And what I mean by that, I mean many different things by that. I mean, if you're just a regular, ordinary, everyday citizen, you know, just a regular working class person, or somebody who perhaps comes from like something powerful, and it wasn't just about me and my personal journey. I've heard many different stories of like kids coming from these families where they rebel, they don't do what the family wants, and they don't become whatever it is the family wanted for them, because they wanted to be in some way their own person. They wanted to be independent of it. And that very battle that I'm talking about, the mind control, the trauma-based mind control, a lot of it starts with them. And oftentimes, and not always, they do trauma-based mind control programs on, let's say, a kid who, let's say you're the child of like an ambassador or a war profiteer. A war profiteer would be a good example for this. Your whole life, you are literally going to be in some way, shape, or form monitored or surveilled, and there's going to be some kind of tab that is kept on you. And it's for a reason that you actually have no control over whatsoever. And it's the same thing. Like let's say if your dad's like Tony Soprano, right? The same thing happens to you if you're the son and you're not even involved with anything that goes on, right? So we are living in a world of, again, I always bring up this term, targeted individuals. So if you're someone who, like, let's say, was supposed to go to Yale to study medicine, or you were supposed to go to Stanford to study rocket science, or you were supposed to go to Harvard to study law, and you came from a family that did that or expects that of you because that's within your legacy, and then you don't do it, to, let's say, because you're like a musician, maybe you want to go be a famous guitarist, maybe you're into becoming an author, maybe you wanted to do something that fell outside of the bounds of the mainstream agenda within your family, then you get written out and screwed over and messed with in these ways that I could only really explain to you using a term like MK Ultra. And for some people, it's not the case. I mean, some people just make bad decisions, right? They don't do what they're supposed to do in life to progress. And then there are people who may have also made bad decisions too, but there was more to it. Like they grew up in a very abusive situation. Maybe they picked up on substance abuse and alcohol at a very early age. But then also by that same token, they could have gone through like some serious trauma, and they picked up on their programming, their family's programming, like them trying to mold that person like a little cult object, like I said earlier. And they didn't do it, so they picked up on substances and alcohol and rebellion, not because they necessarily wanted to be a rebel per se, but because they were actually just trying to shatter the cultural programming of their, perhaps elitist and powerful family, right? So I didn't take the SATs, for instance, when I was very young, and I had a billionaire family member of mine who found that out. I was also 17. I just got my driving permit, and then I got my first car bought for me, and I was driving it home from this family member's house of mine who's very well off, 5 homes, whatever. There's someone who buys a vacuum cleaner or a TV or like whatever they buy, they know every single thing about the product before they even buy it. They'll ask the salesman questions that they can't even answer. They're like that kind of a person. Like, they don't just look into like, if they buy themselves a new car, they don't just look into like the Kelley Blue Book, right? They go and get it inspected and tested out and everything. I was driving my first car home from this person's house, and the brake pads were bowled on the highway. And now there's this, like, it's some people would say that maybe you're paranoid, or maybe they were just like cheap or something, but it happened right around this time where it became fully known information that I was not like gonna go to school and go to Harvard and work for all the bloodline, family, Fortune 500, whatever it is, because I realized that when you do go to college, you're going to go and yes, you're going to get a degree. And yes, half the time, whatever you get a job in is not what you majored in. And then you're going to go work for somebody who has already been rich practically their whole life just because of, who they were born into or what they were related to, because they were related to some kind of bloodline, family type stuff, because everything around you in some form or another is controlled by the 13 bloodline families. And when you go to college, you get that degree just to say, hey, I'm ready to go and work for some eccentric billionaire who maybe works like two days a week. And then, other than that, he's taken off mañana to Fiji. Well, you're basically working your life away to make it so that they can have more helicopters and brunch and more trips to Epstein Island. So we have this society that's now being brainwashed in the very same way that I was when I was young. I was told that if I don't go to Harvard, like my grandfather and great-grandfather, that I'm a piece of shit. If I don't go to Harvard Law School and become a senior counsel at Ropes and Gray, that I'm a piece of crap. And I wanted to be my own person. So I said at a very young age that I'm not going to be going in that direction, because I wanted to be a person of my own. And for a lot of people, what happens when they come from this kind of a dynamic, they become the expendable child. They become a scapegoat. So what happens is they get excommunicated, disinherited, all kinds of. They get followed around by creepy vehicles, because it seems to me, and I'll just come out and say it. I think there was an agenda against me for a very long time, and what they do to gaslight you then is that, oh, you're paranoid, you're overthinking it, you want to see the situation how you want to see it so that you can justify some of your bad decisions and shortcomings, etc. That's another way they gaslight you, and how they gaslight other people that they can't control, because if they can't control you, you are crazy to anybody who can't manipulate you. Did you catch that? You are crazy to anybody who cannot manipulate you. And this goes for anybody. I don't care what you're related to. I don't care if you were raised in a trailer, a cardboard box, or you were raised in an ivory tower. That truth goes along all of the socioeconomic spectrum. But going forward, the news now implicates the very trauma-based mind control that happens to certain individuals at a young age. Meaning it's not just like it's psychological abuse, but it's also, I would argue, like this form of academic, economic abuse. Because I know a lot of people where I grew up, right? Their life was what I call built in. So they went to school, they got the marks, they did the this, that, the other, and they might have worked hard at something to their credit, but their life was built in, meaning they hit certain marks and then their family throws them that dough, or the new car, that they get them some kind of like something that keeps them afloat after that. Even if, let's say, they graduate from like Clemson or like Penn State or some nice school, and then they don't go and get a nice job, they still get that dough. That's what I mean by their life was built in. Like, sure, they were like smart in some way, but they always had a backing because they went along with the mind control, versus, let's say, the black sheep that had all the redeeming qualities of someone with integrity and somebody who wanted to see everybody be happy in the world, no matter who they were. Those people that come from, like, let's say if you're a senator's son and you come from a senator's son kind of family, and you say, hey, listen, F you all, I don't want to go to UPenn to study finance. I want to, let's say, go be a boxer, or like try to make it to the top in something that's entrepreneurial, let's say. And they see that you already want to be your own person. They try to implement tactics to control you, but at a certain point, they get rid of you. And that could mean in the worst sense of the concept. Because if you actually were to get famous, influential, make that dough on your own, and they see that in some way, shape, or form, and that you're succeeding outside of that, well, then now you're really going to be someone they don't like. I'll leave that to your own interpretation. But they love to use trauma. They'll like put you through a situation, traumatize you by it, and then say, see, that was horrible. Don't you want better for yourself? Like, don't you want to go out and like be the next Ronald Reagan or the next Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk? Don't you want to go and be that now that you went through this kind of thing? You always see it in the rap songs, right? The rappers, oh, I came from nothing to something. We came from nothing to something. You know, it's like it, and that's all MK Ultra shit. Like that, and like the trauma of like $100 million, fuck a friend, and you know, like all the stuff that you know, slick talk, $100 million, that's $100 million, fuck a friend, you know, like all that stuff is MK Ultra, because that's that death cult sacrifice attitude. And that's why in these other families, like the rich ones, like if you're a Bush, Your whole life is going to be filled with trauma. Same with Anderson Cooper, because Gloria Vanderbilt left him nothing, disinherited him too. Like, he was told his whole life like he was nothing and that he sucked, and then he got passed around the pedo cult, and he probably serviced Jeffrey Epstein's island pretty well. But that Anderson Cooper is a great example of what I'm talking. Oh, Bill Gates, that sick mother effer. He's like, well, I'm going to leave my kids nothing. Hopefully they die in a box. And then what they do is say that's rugged individualism. And, oh, well, you need to make it on your own. So they use, like, something that's true, but behind the whole entire surface of it, it's because they love to eat their young. They don't even want to start them out. And then, you got all these other people like I grew up around. They were getting handed New Year Jeeps. They were getting handed all kinds of things and didn't even come from, let's say, half the money I did. Little did they know. And then you see them getting start out. Their life is built in because they went along with the mind control. And I went like that to my bloodline situation. And then I end up with bald brake pads on my first truck that was a 2000 Dodge Dakota. It was a 2001 Dodge Dakota that I got in 2010. I drove it home and the brake pads were bald. And this was right around the time where I refused to take the SATs. I'd shave my head. I'd refused to wear like boat shoes and like Nantucket red shorts, or like someone who goes and lives off of like where's that place that Obama parties, like Martha's Vineyard, like where everybody's like super leftist and brainwashed. And like I didn't want to adopt that like puss boy culture, so like I got to be, I guess, someone who in some way sees that there was an agenda against me in my life, because I always just liked motorcycles, and like I grew up liking stuff like motocross. Now I got a dirt bike, brand new Kawasaki 2023 KLX Enduro. I mean, that bike is amazing. It's a beautiful bike. And now when I look back and I reflect on some things, so that maybe somebody else out there who's going through the same thing or knows somebody that is, like, I'm trying to go out and move forward. I'm going back to school in the fall. I'm very excited for that. Going to study computers, and I got myself a dirt bike, and I'm moving forward as one of these expendable children. I love life today. Life is beautiful. It's the system that's ugly. And sure, someone who benefits from the system, they'll disagree. They'll call me a hater and say, well, you just don't know what it's like to hold a band or have a Lambo or whatever it is. I love my life today, and I look forward to moving on with it and putting all this stuff in the past. But this is for everybody else out there who might be going through something, especially if it's related to stuff like family, money, mind control, trauma-based mind control, like trying to use situations you've gone through, and they're trying to like hold all of it over your head so that you can cry at some investor symposium one day about how you went through this, that, and the other, so you can make JP Morgan more money through some charitable effort that they're doing at some like charity tennis club or whatever it is. And like that's kind of how like I was talked to. Like when I lost my mom, God rest her soul, I was told at a young age, well, you're going to use her death to become some type of sellout millionaire, 50 Shades of Grey type mother effer. And I didn't like that at all. I didn't take nice to that at all. So I became an expendable child because I didn't go for the mind control, the trauma-based mind control, because I apparently didn't want to go from nothing to something, like all the future shit, and it's all because I saw at a young age that it was all mind control. And that doesn't mean don't go out and work hard, make your paper, pay your bills, make it so that one day you don't have to kill yourself for money. But when you have like a life after falling out like this in a way that would really upset anybody, you want to be able to enjoy your stuff. But today I had to go and take a walk and a run. I didn't even hop on my bike today because I knew I actually had to go and sort some thoughts of mine out before I go and interact with a machine like that. So when you go out into the world and interact with this world, Remember that everything around you in some way or another is a form of control. Everything is mental. This is what the point that I'm making now is what I'm trying to boil this whole monologue down to, is that everything's a form of control, and that fortune favors not the brave but the mind controlled. See, the opposite's true. Fortune doesn't favor the brave nowadays. You know, the brave just get killed and targeted and gaslit and greenlit and told they're crazy and that they're a conspiracy theorist and that they overthink things and that they're this, that, and the other, versus someone who's mind controlled. Nowadays, you're mind controlled. You're on top of the whole entire world because the whole world is mind controlled. You know, and they're using all the very same tactics now, you know, like trying to fragment people's personality, make them question whether they're a boy or a girl, making them question who they are, like turning their ideological views into an identity, when in reality it should be the content of one's character and not that of their personal demographics. But you see, that's how they get you, is they start messing with you while you're trying to formulate an identity for yourself. That's when they get you, especially in the golden years. That's why these people like to mess with children. That's why they like to mess with children, because now they can use them, turn them into servile little ants, little Epstein ants, little Fortune 500 Henry Kissinger ants. You know, go out there and shill for Davos and Wall Street and sell out this country to the multinational corporations and merchants and the United Nations that now wants to normalize touching children. See, this all goes back to the children and what they're going to do with their lives at the behest of the elite bloodline families. So if you or anybody my advice to you is you go out, be your own person. Don't go to college unless you really want to be a doctor, lawyer, scientist, engineer, because other than that, college is a waste of your time. Go out and find something that you're good at, that represents who you are, instead of going along with the matrix. Because your life up front might be hard for a while, but the finish line and when you finally come into your own, it's far more worth than living in some high-rise box so that you can travel in your nice car to the other box and live within this grid where you're always plugged in. You know, you're plugged in over here, and everything you do is surveilled, and you got to wear the mask, and you got to. And I'm not talking no dope. I'm talking about that pharma dope. So before anything else, and before you go out into this world, make sure they don't turn you into a dope, and you don't get controlled by these people, and that you have discernment, because these are the end times. So embrace it, and go out and find something that you have a passion for. Go out and reject the programming that has really been just hammered on your life since you came out of womb. It's all started in the hospital. I've had whole entire lectures on that too. You know, you were bought and sold from the beginning. You were sold as a commodity into this world to be a slave of darkness. So, you know, if you're someone like a truth teller, you're someone who believes in goodness, and you believe in not being like a sellout shill, then you need to go out and make your voice heard and stop living in fear, and stop letting the material realm control what you do, say, and how you act as a person, especially to other people. Because we're supposed to lift each other up, not break each other down. And I know I can be harsh sometimes, but you need to go out and point some things out and stop being so afraid to call things like they really are. So I hope this whole entire monologue was productive for you. But as a newly engaged male, I gotta go make dinner. And I'll have more for you soon. Thank you for listening.